Good evening, everyone. My name is Lori Strauss, and I am the Executive Director for the Atlanta Press Club. I want to thank you all for coming out here this evening. We're really looking forward to our program. Tonight's title is We'll Always Have Paris, the Popularity of Celebrity News. You all will have, should have seen blue flyers on your chairs that are talking about other upcoming events for the Atlanta Press Club. We hope to see you at those as well. I see many of you also have the red Atlanta Media Guidebooks. Those are courtesy of Manning, Selvage, and Lee. If you did not get a media book, we do have others over here on the counter, and please feel free to take one on your way out. I would like to introduce our moderator for this evening. That is Kurt Holman. Kurt reviews movies, theater, pop culture as a staff writer for the alternative weekly newspaper Creative Loafing here in Atlanta. Kurt is twice a winner of the Green Eyeshades Award for Critical Writing. He was a 1988 student judge for the Peabody Broadcasting Awards and a 2005 Educational Endowment of the Arts Fellow. Kurt has written for the New York Press, Salon.com, Playboy.com, we want to hear about some of those, American Theater, the Nashville Scene, the Nashville Banner, and Atlanta Magazine. Kurt has a BA in creative writing from Vanderbilt University and an MA in journalism and mass communication from UGA. Please welcome Kurt.
Thank you. The Playboy.com things aren't that interesting because almost none of them were actually published, even though I did get paid for them, which is, in some ways, it's the best possible situation. But anyway, that's your stuff. You've got my stuff. Is that my stuff? No, here's my stuff. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'm Kurt Holman, and I'm moderating the panel tonight. And so I'll start off by throwing out the first use of the term Brangelina for our thing about celebrity journalism. And I'll introduce our panel now. And on the end, we have Jason Bronis. Is it Bronis? He is a domestic video journalist with the Associated Press based in Atlanta, just around the corner. And he is responsible for covering the Southeast U.S. for AP Television. As a video journalist, Jason works both behind and in front of the camera. He provides breaking news coverage and national reports for the 1,800 affiliate websites of AP's online video network. Many of the biggest stories Jason has covered with the AP involve celebrities and their exploits. Jason spent weeks in the Bahamas covering the death of Anna Nicole Smith's son, Daniel. When the former playmate died, Jason was dispatched to South Florida and then on to Nassau, covering the ensuing court battle for months. And next to Jason is Angela Tuck, the public editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who is also on the board of directors for the Atlanta Press Club. Her job is to respond to readers who have concerns about accuracy, fairness, and other issues related to the newsroom. She writes a weekly column on Saturdays and works with the news staff to make them aware of reader comments and questions. She has worked as a reporter and editor at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Detroit Free Press, the St. Petersburg, Florida Times, and the Lexington, Kentucky Herald-Leader, her hometown newspaper. And here we have Art Harris, two-time Emmy winner and former investigative correspondent for CNN, a Pulitzer nominee for the Washington Post, and nowadays an independent journalist, TV producer, and special correspondent for Entertainment Tonight. And I believe your mother's here tonight. That's correct? Yes.
Let's get my hand.
Among many endeavors these days, Art breaks stories for ET, ET Online, and his own news blog. Is that artharris.com? Yeah. And for ET, he's covered the last presidential campaign, scoring exclusives with the candidates and their families, including a rare White House tour with the First Lady Laura Bush, seen by 30 million people. During the Michael Jackson trial, he landed exclusives for CNN, such as an interview with the DA, then went on to break other stories for CBS Early Show, 48 Hours, ET, and The Insider. And you have some video stuff to show us to start off. So would you want to do that? Yeah.
Sure. Let me give you a little flavor. Thanks. Show you a little quick clip and then
Harris, one of the best journalists there is. Art Harris, who is a great journalist. Nancy, my prosecution sources at the time were telling me this report was, quote, not worth the paper it was printed on.
The Insider's Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter, Art Harris, obtained the tape of the boy's mother.
This mother sounds like a woman who feels she's been brainwashed. Whether that's real or not, on the tape it sounds like she very much believed it. So in her mind, she was in danger. Bloody Nazarene. Across the river I can see a building burning where the Marines had returned fire. It's this charge, the alleged link between the strip club and the mob, that has legal officials concerned. The long line up the stairs of the White House press plane, but it's a red carpet all the way. Mrs. Harris pointed her silver Mercedes at her husband. The impact knocked him 25 feet. Then witnesses said she wheeled around and ran over him on the ground, and turned and ran over him again. Then whipped around and ran over him a third time. Afterwards, Mrs. Harris said it was an accident. It's almost impossible to comprehend the horror of what went on in this hospital and others like it under Hitler. Imagine if you had a child who wasn't considered perfect, a child with a handicap, maybe retarded, maybe a learning disability, maybe he's simply unruly in school. He could be turned in and brought here and killed by doctors. You've called the tapes, quote, shocking beyond belief. Why?
Because they are about a young 23, 24-year-old girl having a sexual relationship with the President of the United States in the Oval Office.
Sex with the president.
Yeah.
Oral sex.
Yes.
Hurtling toward death in his tunnel. What's striking about that night is how many questions remain. It was at this point Dr. Maillet ran into the tunnel, desperate to save the life of a woman he didn't know was a princess. When you hear the name Beverly Hills, what comes to your mind as a place to live?
Persecution and segregation.
Who was that?
That's Muhammad Ali.
You remember him?
Yeah.
Why Atlanta? Was it considered a target, or as one expert in counterterror suggests, a resting place, far enough away from the real targets for hijackers to feel safe? Lots of clues, but no conclusion. Art Harris, CNN, Atlanta.
It was just a few things from the last few years that not many people saw, because CNN may have, a few viewers, but Entertainment Tonight, I found out, and the Insider together have 10 to 14 million viewers a day, and I get stunned when I have to I get a story like this that you haven't seen, which was Anna Nicole's long lost stepbrother who was tucked away in a Texas prison, supposedly the one who had raped her, and you're seeing it for the first time.
And tomorrow, the one Anna Nicole bombshell that's never been revealed until now. You didn't hear much about what? Rape?
Did you rape your sister, Anna Nicole?
Anna Nicole's brother in prison, locked up for assault. But did he assault Anna?
When's the last time you spoke to your sister?
Plus, what was growing up with Virgie really like?
I'm not knocking Virgie, but she just didn't know how to deal with us kids growing up.
The stories he's never told. The interview only one show could get. Behind the glass, inside the bars, Anna's prison brother. Tomorrow on...
So I won't show it until after we.
That's the teaser,
That's one thing I've learned, that they didn't teach me at CNN or at the Washington Post. Is you got to, create a little anticipation. So I'll turn it back over.
Okay, thank you. Well, the part of the topic is to talk about the increasing news coverage that celebrities receive these days, and it made me think of a quote that I'll offer. I'll do it out of context first. Ladies and gentlemen, when you look at this gorgeous couple, it's no wonder that they're a household name around the world, like bacon and eggs. And that quote is from the movie Singing in the Rain, which is from 1952, and it's about 1927 Hollywood. And even though I wouldn't use a movie as like a documentary, I think that probably indicates that, there's been celebrity journalism for a while. And it's one thing I want to sort of start out. The question is, has it increased much, and how it's changed and things like that? How different is it now than it's always been? And, does anyone want to start with that?
Well, I mean, I certainly think that among other things, the increase in television programs focusing on celebrities and celebrity journalism, and the increase in 24-hour cable news channels that have a huge window of time to fill, it has led to an increase in the coverage of celebrities, and that's spread across all forms of journalism. I don't think there's any major media organization who can say, that they're not guilty, if you want to use that word, of focusing an extreme amount of attention on celebrities, because that's the message that we're getting from our audience, is that a good sector of them definitely want that.
Angela, what do you think of that? I mean, and are they saying that? So they're saying that that's what they want. Are we giving them what they want?
I definitely believe that is the case. Now that we have so many ways to track, particularly the online audience, we see and we pay close attention to what they're looking at online and what our reader surveys tell us people are interested in. And at the top of the list, oftentimes, is celebrity-type news, and at the bottom of the list is your more serious international and national issues news. So, I mean, when you're trying to appeal to customers, yes, you try to give them more of what they want. We do more of it probably online than we do in the paper. Spend more time, because we recognize that we have two audiences, an online audience, and they have different needs than the print audience. But we do pay a lot of attention to celebrity news, and like you were saying, the national news shows. I mean, that's all they almost do, especially certain shows. I don't know if this is working.
It's more for the recording than for the room. So
better that way.
It's not on, I don't think.
Yeah, this I think is for your sound. Can you hear?
Yes. Yeah.
You all please use the microphone. We can't hear you back here.
Can we use yours or not?
Well, the microphones. Can we turn it on so we can do it? We'll just talk louder. The microphones are for the recording, but not.
The mic does work.
Oh, it does.
That I think is set up for the camera, so that isn't actually gonna make y'all talk louder.
Okay. I don't know. Is it on?
Testing. No, I don't think so.
We could probably just project.
There, now.
There you go.
Testing. There you're on. That's what they talk. Okay. Well, to respond to your question, I think that, going back to the days when I was the worst movie critic the Washington Post ever had, I lasted about 6 months, and Bob Woodward felt sorry for me and brought me over to do other things, and I wound up as Atlanta bureau chief, covered the South and politics, and wound up one day hearing that there had been a TV preacher who had sinned up in North Carolina, and I needed to go check it out. That was Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. They'd not only sinned or dallied with someone they shouldn't have, but they built the elderly out of $67 million, it turned out, and Jim Baker went to prison for about 7 years. And out of that, I think we saw a glimpse into a world, a very colorful world of air-conditioned doghouses and charitable tax-exempt contributions spent on things that you wouldn't normally think that were associated with a church, like sex toys for the preacher and his wife. And so I was sort of launched into that story with Mike Isikoff of the Washington Post, my partner, and from there I went downhill, I guess, into other investigative kinds of stories, but often returning to personalities in the news. And then I think what you've seen over the years is with the explosion of the internet, and as Angela said, a demand for online readers. Look at TMZ.com that sprang up out of the ashes of celebrity justice. My friend Harvey Levin, who I covered O.J. with out in L.A., came up with this idea, and they must get, how many, I don't know, millions and millions of hits a day, and some of them actually, trash me and my little blog, artharris.com, The Bald Truth, a.k.a. The Bald Truth, so which I'm happy about. And then there are other internet spin-offs. ET Online is sort of fledgling, but the show, the two shows are enormous in its reach, and it's sort of sad to think about the number of people who get their news from shows like that and don't go to Read the AP or the AJC for other things. But what do you do? What are you going to do? And I'll talk more about that in a minute.
Well, one of the other parts of the question, or the other parts of the topic is this attention driven by consumer interest, or is the public interested as a result of the, media attention? So, which came first, the chicken or the egg, I guess, is the thing. So does anyone have thoughts about where it starts and how it proliferates, beyond just the technological thing, I guess?
Well, I mean, I think as Angela mentioned, major media organizations that have websites are perhaps sometimes on a minute-by-minute basis knowing exactly what the people who visit those websites read. When Anna Nicole Smith's son died, it was right around the 5th anniversary of September 11th, and we spent a lot of man-hours putting together a large number of stories about the significance of the anniversary of September 11th from a wide number of locations around the country. And when we got up on September the 12th and we went to our email, we got the report of what people were looking at online on September 11th. The number one story by a wide margin was the death of Anna Nicole Smith's son. And when I saw that, quite frankly, I didn't even know she had a son or that he died. Mm-hmm. But the people who are savvy about finding their news on the internet are finding this stuff and seeking it out. And as a result, it's like a little red light goes off next to those stories. And when you have that kind of technology, on your computer, on your desk, and you're a news executive who's making decisions about where to spend money, it sort of becomes a fairly simple equation. Whether that's a good thing or not, I think, is something that's certainly up for debate. But I don't think there's any question that the desire for it is out there. And when we put a little bit out there, what we get is that they want more. And we try and deliver that to the extent that we can.
I think the key is not to let that drive your whole presentation. I mean, that there is a craving for celebrity news. We all, pass the auto accident on the road and look at it. I mean, it's a train wreck. I mean, we look at it. But we cannot let the metrics of what's hot and what's, online tell us that, it has to be on the front page necessarily, or we have to put a lot of resources into it. And we also, each news organization has its own missions, and increasingly the AJC's mission is to reflect the local coverage that we have going on here in Atlanta. Now, so there's probably going to be more focus coming up on local celebrities, and we've always focused a lot on local celebrities. But we would we would give a lot more time online to the Paris Hilton story, to the Anna Nicole Smith story. But if you look at the AJC when those stories were breaking, we hardly had any real mention of them beyond the Peach Buzz stories in the print edition. So I think we all have to, keep the interest in them in the proper perspective, and also keep in mind that each news organization has different missions, and you want to stay focused on what your mission is, and ours is providing, unique local content. And
I think it might be worth making a distinction between, I guess, celebrity scandal stories and just celebrity stories, because it's like, George Clooney has a movie, or George Clooney cares about Darfur, and so we'll write about George Clooney and do sort of a kind of the more traditional publicist-driven thing versus, something bad happens or someone does something stupid and chasing that. And it seems like the scandal part tends to be where a lot of the criticism goes, but there's also kind of like the more slow down to see the auto accident thing happens, I mean.
Yeah, there's a famous Miami television station, and I won't say which one it is, but the nickname that they got was Nuts and Sluts, and that seemed to be a formula that put them at the head of the ratings every sweeps period. And not that all the shows do follow that, but there's definitely a place for that. And people can't avoid it. It's sad. I did a piece for People magazine earlier. I was telling Jason about a paralyzed Iraqi child whose mother was turned around on the way to the hospital by a gun battle, went home, a midwife delivered the child, and pulled his arm, ripped all his nerves. Anyway, the father was a doctor, went on the internet, found a surgeon in Houston who said he would do it for free, the surgery, if he could get there. But Iraq wouldn't let him out, the U.S. wouldn't let him in, I did this piece, and people I had no idea. Within 48 hours, they were on a plane to get a visa in Amman, and then to Houston. And I got to tell you something. I mean, I haven't felt like that as a journalist in many years. And then I returned to Anna Nicole, and found that while people, and I put that story on my website, and then measuring the hits. I mean, they were heartfelt, and there were a few hundred, and the more stories I did or broke, and I would put pieces I did from ET on the site, and ET would link to me and a few other people. And my wife said, "Can't you get away from that? Why don't you, write about Michael Vick's dogfighting?" And I did. Finally, I put a Humane Society video up today. But it was only after I got, 5,000 page views yesterday about the story of Virgie Arthur's lawyer, John O'Quinn, who called Howard K. Stern a murderer many times on national TV after the medical examiner and the police said there was no foul play. And so the question, is, will this train wreck ever stop? And I was amazed. Somebody called me, and you get fans. I mean, this is a brave new world. People call and say, how much they love or hate you, and then someone said, "Art, did you know that your story was ranked by Google News and the news blogs as the top story on the news blog for Anna Nicole?" I said, "No." Well, that didn't make me feel as good as the Emmy for covering the Olympic Park bombing for CNN. But we take small icings on our cake. It is a bizarre world. I'm just learning it, and I'm trying to figure it out as I go. But there is a niche audience, as Angela probably knows and Jason knows, for certain things. The question is, if you're running your own paper or your own news site, or when I see my website as it's really a platform for video, for pictures, for stories, and to see who comes there, I can measure it every day and see where they're coming from, who refers them. And Court TV people say, "Yeah, we look at your site to see what's going on with Anna Nicole." Do I abandon that to go do something else I'd rather write about? I mean, Google tells me I've made about $59.25 so far doing it. So it's, maybe at some point I'll get some ads. But anyway, it's a great question. Before, chicken or the egg. In the old days, you had TV, you had movie tours by the stars that were paid for, junkets, paid for by the studios. And reporters would go, and you'd have a 2-minute interview. You'd get your tape, and you'd go back to CNN or wherever, and that was it. There was no spreading the word by writing about it online or anything. So I think the internet has also created a whole new demand and feeding frenzy.
Yeah. Well, something I was also thinking about this, as far as like the contemporary period, is that we have a time with like reality television shows where people who are people on the shows, obviously, like including Anna Nicole, will behave in these, arguably inappropriate ways, So it's sort of like, okay, it's fair game to go after her because she's behaving in this way in a public thing, theoretically, maybe not. And there's all this kind of unfiltered, media like blogging and things like that celebrities can do. And it's even confusing, like who's a celebrity now and who's not because of like reality television, where like American Idol contestants become huge celebrities and all that. So I'm sort of wondering, it's like, is it becoming so blurry that we don't even know where the boundaries are anymore? Does anyone have any, it's like, is it me or is it just sort of changing and getting all out of control?
Well, perhaps the boundaries, when it comes to covering these people is when they themselves, step up and say, that's not how I want myself portrayed. And with the crop of celebrities that makes the most news, and I don't work in Los Angeles, I work in Atlanta, so this is mostly what I read, but that crop of celebrities doesn't really seem to much care how they're portrayed. And I think that certainly inspires a sense among the journalists that cover them on a regular basis, or the paparazzi, whatever you want to call them, that there really is no boundaries. If I take a picture of a Lindsay Lohan looking ridiculous and I put it all over the internet, And Lindsay Lohan comes back to the same restaurant that I took the picture of her looking ridiculous and walks in front of my camera again. You know, I think that definitely sort of creates a feeling of, you know, we don't much care, so, you know, why should the people taking the pictures?
Well, from my experience of knowing the paparazzi out there, the line seems to be drawn with certain photographers provoking celebrities into doing things that they might not normally do, or they might. But then they get into a fight or there's some aggressive behavior, and that's great TV. So, you know, you see the big objection is paparazzi gone wild, and you know, do they get arrested? You know, do you arrest a celebrity for punching them out? TMZ had an interesting video the other day of somebody who didn't want his picture taken, I noticed, but the photographer was on a public sidewalk. Well, do they have the right, you know, if they're public figures, to say, I don't want it? Well, no. But if you want a relationship with them, you have to walk a fine line. And, you know, the best thing that celebrities can do nowadays when they get into trouble is to go into rehab, as we've seen. And so, you know, when are they news? When Mel Gibson, of course, makes an anti-Semitic remark, or Anna Nicole dies, sure. But I looked at E.T.'s rankings the other day today as to the number 1, 2, 3, 4 celebrities. And first was Paris, about 600 blog entries. Then was then Brittany. Then Anna Nicole, a dead celebrity. Mm-hmm. And that is something, and she's still the most highly sought out search on ET's website. Same with TMZ, she's way up there. So, but I think your question was, what makes them, you know, famous and when? Mm-hmm. And people say Anna Nicole was just famous for being a train wreck, and why are we giving her all this attention? But if you go beyond that, you know, she had the Marilyn Monroe connection, the Death Wish. I mean, you can elevate that into other fascinations. Princess Diana, when I covered her and talked to the photographer who chased her the most, she actually hated them at one point, but would also be very gracious in posing so they could get the picture they needed, because she needed them. They gave her a power against the royal family. So they also, you know, use the press for their own image. They actually talk to the tabloids, the National Enquirer and the Globe. How do you think they get their stories? Is through the publicists, mm-hmm. because you've got to have people coming back to you. And so, you know, is there no such thing as bad publicity? Probably not.
Yeah. Well, how does this, I guess, turn back on journalists? I mean, because, I mean, a fair amount of people probably will see a lot of coverage of, like, the scandal type things and get turned off, you know. I mean, I'm sure there's, like, a ton of people want to see the train wreck, but another people say, like, okay, that's enough. But there's a sense, like, when you can pull the brake, or is there any brake lever that you can even pull if you want to? You know, I mean, do you turn off? Well, I'll ask for you turn off readers or audiences with this stuff, or is it the people who don't like it a negligible part of it?
One story I broke last week, I found out that there was a plastic surgeon who did Anna Nicole's breast surgery in Texas, and he was trying to sell her videos.
The videos of the actual
videos of the actual surgery.
Yeah.
There was a 2-hour raw tape. He turned it over to a Hollywood agent who gave it to his daughter, who edited it down into a 5-minute DVD cut to the soundtrack of Jaws. and then there was the Trim Spa voiceover Anna Nicole saying, do you like my body? And the video, I'm also told, panned down to her genitals. Now, this guy was trying to hawk that around L.A., and even some of the shows I'm very familiar with, not the one that I'm with, but other even bottom-feeding shows, turned it down. Mm-hmm. Even if they could get away under HIPAA laws, that seems to be that seemed to be the
so there is a point where people won't go.
There is, I think.
I hope it's a little bit higher.
I don't know what to say.
Read all about it. No.
Well, do you, as from hearing back from readers, do you hear from people who say that there's too much online or otherwise celebrity coverage or things like that?
We hear a little of that. Again, we don't do as much of it in the paper as we do online. So, but there are certain stories like, and it's more about like the runaway bride story here in Atlanta, and what was the other one? The Barbie bandits that people really rebel against. The local celebrity that people just say this person's 15 minutes of fame have passed. I think people are seemingly more tolerant of the national celebrities. I still am amazed at how often E.T. does an Anna Nicole piece. How long has it been since she died? But obviously they are, getting, I mean, people want it or they wouldn't still be doing it. But I'm amazed at how much that is still going on, how much people are still interested in that story. I don't really understand it. But obviously people are interested in it, and you have to be respectful of the fact that people are interested in it. I think one of the things that has hurt the media overall over the years, particularly newspaper journalists, is that we don't recognize sometimes what people are interested in and what people want to read about and hear about. And I don't think we should turn our noses up necessarily at that kind of coverage, but I would like to see some stories or some pieces about why there is such a fascination with the Anna Nicole Smiths and the Paris Hiltons of the world.
Well, sorry.
I mean, because obviously so much of what they're doing is manufactured just to get the attention.
And the only other point I was going to make is when we talk about the Internet and the ability to know what people on the Internet are looking at and how often they're looking at it and when they're looking at it, that technology, for the most part, is at a fairly young stage. We may learn as the ability to track Internet users becomes better and we get better technology that the segment of the audience that we're tracking is really not the audience that we need to be appealing to. That may bear itself out somewhere down the line because as everything changes on the Internet, we're going to learn more and more about what people want. It's true that this is what the tools we have are telling us. This is what people want. The question is there a larger audience out there that would respond as enthusiastically to something else? And that's what we don't know.
Or is this a demographic that could be sliced up and you can make a case for, well, we really don't care about them because they don't spend any money on our product, so, let's just say, okay, let them, go to the grocery store and buy the Globe, and we can do, something that's somewhat of a higher calling.
It's funny that you mentioned that people sort of rebelling against the runaway bride, but things like Anna Nicole Smith are like the legitimate celebrity news, while those are like trivial because they're local, I guess.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic there. It really is. I think the online celebrity news, people go to it over and over and over just to see if there's been updates too online, especially if something big is going on with a certain celebrity. I mean, if people ever outlawed workers' ability to use computers, because people are just bored and they're clicking over to the various sites to see, what's new. They're in their cubicle or whatever, and one of the things our online people always joke about is we really only have to be more interesting than people's work. And that's that hard.
That's a pretty low bar to try and clear.
I mean, it's a joke that they have, but I mean, people are, they're just looking for a diversion when, between the work stuff. And so they're clicking over and over on the same things just to see if something's new or updated. Photos are really big. Whenever we do the red carpet photo galleries, those are enormously popular. People want to see what people are wearing, what designers, how they're posing, hairstyles. That kind of stuff is just, it goes, people go crazy with that stuff on the photo galleries are so incredibly popular.
I know.
Angela, what you said, I got a taste of people's bloodlust because I think I went out of town for about a week, and I came back to all these nasty emails cursing me for being so lazy. Why didn't you give us this up? You haven't done anything. What are you doing? You know, and then thanking me profusely when I break something that they can't find anywhere else. And, you know, I happen to get these lawsuits that are filed sometimes right before or, you know, simultaneously with being dropped into court. And like TMZ does, they'll stamp TMZ.com. You know, I've got somebody, you know, my web guys at Southern Web stamp ArtHarris.com. And, you know, so, you know, you learn what they want and what, you know, it's a vicious cycle, you know, in terms of what are you going to do and why. So, I don't know what your experience has
I
been.
mean, I think this sort of goes back to where, and look, I'm not saying that every, you know, journalist in the Associated Press is now focusing on getting pictures of celebrities and putting celebrity news online, but a lot of times with the ability to track what people are doing online, it's like having a new toy. And if your goal is to draw an audience, if your goal is to make as many people as possible read what you're writing and watch the video you're putting out there and look at the pictures, and you've got a report in front of you that says, yesterday the most people wanted to read about Michael Vick online, it's very difficult for you as a manager the next day to say, well, there's nothing going on with Michael Vick, so I'm not going to give them any Michael Vick news. If that's what everybody wanted on Wednesday, chances are they're going to want it again on Thursday, whether or not there's something new in the story to tell. And because we're in this age now where the internet is happening and everything is changing very quickly, you know, there are a lot of decisions that are made not necessarily based on news value, but based on what are people reading and what are people going to want to read. What do they want to read, and what will they move their mouse pointer over to and click on? Because it's that action of that click that is the meter, if you will, of
I guess that's one of the dangerous things about it, because, you know, newspapers or magazines can say, it's like, well, we'll have this story about Darfur, but we'll also have, like, the George Clooney story, you know, and it's like, well, the people, you know, we have, like, 10 times the clicks on the George Clooney story, and so should we do the next Darfur story, you know, when we go along?
Or what are you going to spend more money on?
Exactly.
If you have $10 million to spend, and, you know, the Clooney story costs $9 million and the Darfur story costs $9 million, what are you going to spend the $9 million on? If you know that you're going to get 20, 30, 40 exponential time the audience every time you put George Clooney out there. And that's a very, very powerful force.
Anderson Cooper was brilliant to get Angelina Jolie. She was brilliant to find this wonderful cause to combine celebrity with, you know, good deeds, so that you know, it's a win-win. You can feel good giving her lots of attention and going there. Oprah going to establish this wonderful school in Africa. You know, you're going to go cover that because it's Oprah, and she is the most watched and revered personality today, perhaps. So, but you're right. I mean, what astounded me when I went out to L.A. Well, first when I went from the Washington Post to CNN a number of years ago, and my first producer, who was Bill Moyer's producer, Marty Cunin, great guy. He said, Art, love your stuff in the Washington Post, but we're going to make you shallow yet. And they did. And now even more so.
But CNN.
but it's you know, now I have the luxury of having a little more freedom where I can, you know, do my thing, but also go on to some of these talk shows and talk about you know, why we shouldn't be doing it, or you know, trying to figure out how does it fit in. I mean, one of the columns, I'd like to do a piece about the real person behind the explosion of celebrity journalism, or actually of the recent train wrecks in the last year. You know, Karl Rove. We have not seen much of him. He has been coaching Paris Hilton. He's been sending his alien evil forces to buy drinks for groupies who are surrounding our friend Mel Gibson. And sadly, Mel then crashes into a tree. I mean, it's a White House CIA plot to create headlines that will keep people from, well, keep Iraq from getting on the front page. Now that's really a stretch, but you understand that this is Paris is probably George's best friend. Is probably every day they get up, the White House briefings, they say, "Thank God," another train wreck.
Yeah, Centra Wilson in Salon wrote a thing about basically that, how people like to vent their anger at Paris Hilton, especially when she, went to jail and then was sprung from jail, but before she went back to jail, because it's easier to be mad at her for her behavior than for like governmental things that are very complicated and legal, and it's like, well, we can get after her because she's, to quote South Park, a stupid spoiled whore, so, it's like, I still need to offend the Paris Hilton fans in the room, So I see someone with a hand up, and I thought, since we're about a halfway mark, should we open it up for questions so the audience can get in?
Molly Wu with the Reed Report in Planet Atlanta. I have to admit, listening to the three of you panelists speak, as a journalist that has had a lot of faith in the power of journalism to do great in the world, it's very sad and very disappointing. There were times, and there still are times, when, as journalists, we could have reported news that literally could have saved thousands of lives. And we passed it up for the latest with Michael Jackson's nanny, who might have said something about this or that. And we have played quite well into the powers that be that would love a distraction from the really ends that journalists used to report on. Yes, there's a great demand for Paris Hilton. There's a great demand for anything that's prurient. If a beautiful woman walks down the street, there might be a great demand for something else from many people yelling, "Hey, I'll give you 10. Does that mean she should turn around and say, "Yeah, I got it for sale"? But have we been any different as journalists? Oh yeah, people love to hear about these issues that really have nothing to do with the welfare of this nation, with what our children will live with in 10 years, with spending by our federal government that is out of control, the loss of habeas corpus. There's very little reporting. Each one of you, I assume, have had the information that could have saved lives. If you didn't, you were like, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. But instead, yes, we've gone celebrity journalism. And I'm wondering, how do you feel now about the state of journalism in America?
What about, I guess the question is, the responsibility of
journalism in America,
yeah.
Since we are now driven by the market that demands the lowest denominator of, I want to know more about Michael Vick.
Well, let me say a couple of things, as in my defense, and in the defense of my company, which probably would like me to say some things in its defense. We're here today to talk about celebrity journalism. The Associated Press has reporters working on things all over this country and all over this world, and the vast majority of what goes on our daily news report is far more important and far more enlightening than what Paris Hilton did last night. What is the state of journalism today? I think that you would be a little bit naive if you didn't acknowledge that the state of journalism is pretty bad. And the state of journalism is pretty bad because for a very long time, business people who were in the business of journalism were making a lot of money. And no one really realized that the people in the business of journalism were making a lot of money until they started not making a lot of money. And then it really became very important. It didn't matter what they put in the pages of their newspapers, and it didn't matter what they put on their television networks. They made a lot of money. When they stopped making money, then all of a sudden it became very important. Why aren't we making as much money as we used to? And when that started to happen, and it coincides with the dawn of the Internet, but I don't think the Internet is to blame. When that started happening, the state of journalism took a major hit, and it's a hit that it hasn't recovered from.
I'm optimistic, Molly, about some of the things that we're doing, most of the things that we're doing. I think I'm optimistic about most of the things we're doing in the paper. A very small amount of what we're doing, falls into the whole celebrity category. Now, we do quite a bit with, like, the Michael Vick story. I would argue that is an opportunity in our society to talk when we get past the fact that he's the $100-some million quarterback. The issue, and I know the animal rights activists are, all over this now, is the whole dogfighting thing, and that is really an opportunity to shine a spotlight on something that most of us, didn't know a lot about. And I think now, as we go forward with our coverage, we should avoid some of the sensationalistic aspects of it and focus on the fact that this could bring a very heinous activity to light and maybe get some people just take it more seriously.
May I also say,
yeah, go ahead, Molly.
Personally towards you.
No, and I didn't take it personally.
I read the AP every day, and I love it. It's a great source of news.
No, I didn't take it personally at all.
You want to tell that camera right there.
News I can use.
No, I do worry that journalists in general have a bad name, just because of some of what we're doing now. But there still is a lot of really great journalism going on throughout the world, and locally too. I mean, every day there's really good journalism going on that we can all, I think, still be proud of. But then there's a lot that's not so great.
And I thought the Moni Bass's reports from Iraq were fantastic.
Yeah, I didn't take it personally at all, Molly. Not at all.
Okay, do you want to answer that too?
Yeah, Molly. First of all, Molly does great work, and you should look at her website. If you've got connections to some foundations, Molly, that would want to fund me to do some of those, great. Call me. But I think, but I kind of miss Iraq. Actually, I got to tell you, I miss I prefer dodging bullets to Hollywood spin. I was going to say the bold word with T at the end. But, Molly's right to a degree, but once again, the funding to let you go off and dig into things like this is just not there. Now, what I found fascinating in looking for some redeeming moral value in what I do a lot of the time is that, the Anna Nicole case, for example, I mean, if you look at some of the things that the talk shows have allowed people to say about other people, calling, however you feel about Howard K. Stern, but the constant barrage, calling him a murderer and raising questions, as if making statements that are fact that I know aren't, and then watching the reason behind this is that there's the huge $500 million possible settlement, and if, John O'Quinn, a great plaintiff's lawyer out of Texas, can somehow change the venue from the Bahamas to Texas, he might be able to get a piece of that if he can get the body back to Texas. So you see a lot of these issues are manufactured by players on this stage who are using the media for an end game that is the big payoff. And so that kind of ticks me off. And so while I get a lot of criticism for writing things that, Howard Stern's not a murderer, I don't think he is at all. And, I get calls from all sorts of people, from him, from Deborah Opry, from Larry Burkhead. And, the question is, do I, I can't write it fast enough, but I've got other stuff happening. So, but at the same time, is it my responsibility to put out what the real story is? I mean, going back to O.J. days, my first exposure to how you get used, it was one of O.J.'s lawyers telling me one day, "Hey, Art, did you hear the DNA was negative? The tests were negative." And I said, "Well, Bob, what about Dr. Shapiro? What about the tests that were positive?" This was after a couple of glasses of wine one night, and he said, "Oh yeah, call me on Monday, and I'll have those results, and I'll be happy to share them with you." He wanted me to go back to CNN, go on the air, and say the DNA was negative. By the time it trickled down to the jury pool, it would be too late to correct whatever the truth was. And so lawyers are very skilled at trying to use us to do their bidding. And what happened was I got the prosecution to confirm to me that other tests were positive, and I went on the air, first time on television, just saying that while sources close to the prosecution said DNA was negative out of the scene for O.J., the Others say that that it was positive. But you know, if you think about redeeming value, Molly, I guess for me it's trying to level the playing field, and it's not just the prurience, but if I can somehow get a few facts out there and explain the context, then you know, I've done something that day to explain to people what the story behind the story is.
Okay, I think Claire had a thank you for your question, Molly. Did you?
My question has more to do with the state of the American public versus the state of journalism. Do you guys have any opinion on whether the obsession with celebrity scandals or celebrity news coverage is some form of escapism from the more serious things that are going on in the news? I mean, do people get tired of turning on the TV or opening their newspaper and reading about war or terrorist attacks or political scandals, and they want some sort of escapism? Or is this sort of an example of what they call the dumbing down of America? And is it exclusive to America, for that matter? I mean, are we possibly more obsessed with this than other countries?
I have to believe that the sector of the audience who is the most rabid about these kinds of stories are not doing it because they have war fatigue, or that they're not doing it because they can't stand to think about how high the price of gasoline is. And remember, just like any other form of media, the audience is very segmented. So this audience that we're talking about that very much desires this news, this is a small group of people, and the most enthusiastic group of those people are the people who are clicking over and over and over again. I don't believe that those people are doing that, you know, as sort of a form of escapism. I think that, you know, that we're tapping into, we now have the ability to tap into a segment of the audience and a segment of people's interests that we didn't have before. If you wanted to know what celebrities did today, you would wait till 7 o'clock at night when Entertainment Tonight came on and you would watch it. Now you have the ability to know what they do on a minute-by-minute basis because of the Internet. And that just has sort of opened the floodgates for people to say, yeah, you know, maybe I never realized that I wanted to sit at my desk and refresh, so I could see every new picture of Paris Hilton or Lindsay Lohan. But they do it, and I don't think it's because they're maybe they're sick of the person in the next cubicle, but I don't think it's because they're sick of all the unfortunate news that we have to report.
Something that this is kind of different from what you're saying about escapism, but just in covering like theater and movies and things like that, I think there's so much media out there and choices and things that people in general gravitate to stuff that's familiar. So if they see a celebrity, it's like, okay, I know who that person is, so, you know, more will sort of go that way. And I can think of two examples around the movie Hairspray, which opens tomorrow, which I haven't seen, but I've heard is pretty good. But partly because like it became this big hit play, partly because it was probably a movie that people had heard of, if not necessarily had seen, as opposed to some, you know, fun musical about something they might never have heard of, you know. And in making the movie of it, I'm sure there was probably a discussion at some point, you know, whereas, you know, do we want John Travolta in this? And if we don't, can we get the movie made with the amount of money we want, you know? Because everything I've heard about the movie is like, well, it's really good, and John Travolta, you know. So, you know, there's a necessity if you want to get certain attention, I guess, to having celebrities involved. There's a commodity that is useful in some ways, you know. So anyway, okay, you? Yeah.
This has been incredible. I've really enjoyed it, and you've raised lots of great issues. Three things. First of all, I think the whole question is, are all clicks created equal? And are those people who are clicking like crazy, do they have the disposable income to be truly important to the advertisers? And I think as things evolve, we'll see that they're probably not the important people, the advertisers, and that will change. From my perspective, I see there's sort of a smearing between entertainment and news. And so if news is not, to be outrageous, if Britney Spears shows up with a pink wig, that's outrageous, that's entertaining. And even with my background in MBA finance, 20 years in banking, yes, you know, that catches my attention. Darfur is important. Yes, I need to watch that, but it's the outrageous entertaining factor. So is there a smearing between news and entertainment, and do you feel pressure to be more entertaining and less news?
I think the biggest thing in the business is to be wrong and boring, not necessarily in that order. But, you know, you're competing for people's eyeballs, so you've got to make even real news interesting. And you know, we're storytellers, hopefully, and decent ones. And, you know, hopefully you can elevate something. But you know, there is a blurring of the two. And that's a dilemma, and it's debated at every journalism conference I've heard. And I know what you do about it, because getting back to your question, is an obsession, I think from television and talking to folks out in L.A. And going on the road, there are families, there are people who, whether they're shut-ins or retirees or the less desirable consumer, who actually have a bond. A bond is created with these personalities and with Danny Lind. I mean, I saw so many blog reports about Sugar Pie. By God, you know, is that important? But people were saying that Sugar Pie was dead. Well, you know, I asked Howard. No, he's fine. And I did a little bit. I mean, you know, and so people have this, they feel like they're part of the family. And I think that may create some of the obsessive clicking. So if you think about it, you know, you can come at it with, you got to be a little compassionate towards them, not be too judgmental. At the same time, you know, I'm not going to spend my day checking up on, you know, Sugar Pie's.
Well, and you make a very, very good point about whether or not these are the kind of demographics that we as people who produce content want to be going after. But I also think that there is at least a symptom of a little bit of hypocrisy in this sector of the audience, too. I mean, I can tell you that there have been more times than I can count where if I'm on a plane and I'm flying to Nassau and the person next to me is going there on vacation and they ask me why I'm going there and I tell them, and their first reaction is, you know, I am so sick of hearing about this woman and how she died. And then they will invariably spend the next 10 minutes asking me.
So tell me about this woman and how she died.
Question after question about this woman and how she died. So I think that there's a sense that we want to say, oh, I don't want to see any more of that. I don't want to know what Paris Hilton, what her jeans were that she was wearing when she walked out of the prison. But, you know, it's like sort of the same things that we don't, you know, always want to talk about in mixed company. We do it, and people are interested, even when sometimes they say they're not. And I agree with you that the people who are compulsive about it may not have the disposable income that we'd like them to have. But to play devil's advocate a little bit, I think there are some people out there who talk a good game, but when they're clicking with their mouse, they're doing something different.
Also, unless they're at a public library, they own a computer,
right.
So, you know.
they can at least get access to the Internet.
But with parents, one quick thing, I think that morphed into, do celebrities, is there a double standard with justice? And is she getting, you know, special treatment? And so look at the backlash at the sheriff. And so that, you know, at least for a day maybe, you know, the news that was covering her salaciously redeemed itself, you know, with an issue, you know.
Ma'am, you've had your hand up for a while. Yeah.
I would like to hear your comment on why, and I know all of you all are in that specialty feature area, but I think as a press club, we still should stand by and say that we want true who, what, when, and where, and it means something to our lives.
I can't say it enough. I mean, we got to do both. I think the AJC does do hard news still. We're still doing hard news. We have cut back. These are very challenging times economically for newspapers. There's a variety of reasons as to why that is. I don't think there's any one reason as to why that is. I think people are reading less. Some people would argue that people are reading less because stuff is not as interesting as it is. I think the answer for us is to still offer that unique local investigative stuff that we do, the watchdog stuff that we do. I think people are very, very responsive to the stories about ordinary people that are doing some interesting things. And then I think the other piece of it is the entertainment aspect of it. sports and features and health and news like that, some people, consider that entertainment, but we still do have, people covering government, aggressively covering government here in Georgia. I mean, we spent 6 or 7 months doing a mental health a mental hospital series that, resulted in a takeover, a federal takeover. So there is still a lot that is good that is being done. Could we do more? Absolutely. We could always do more, and I think we're always asking ourselves, what could we do that is more meaningful? And I think you're right to challenge us on it, because I think the challenges from readers who tell us what they want, we need more of that. And toward your comment about the blogs and measuring hits that way, we're not measuring hits necessarily by the blogs, but there is a metrics of what stories are clicked on the most. And that is a reality, that they're looking at those stories as well. Not necessarily the blogs that are clicked on, but the stories that are clicked on. And I do think you have to keep that information, though, in the proper perspective and understand that not everyone is only interested in these particular topics.
Did you have you had a question?
Comment and a question. My name is Maurice Baker, and I work in community relations, and thus I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations. But going back in the past, I can recall a professor of mine saying that in journalism, you can go where kings and queens go, and a lot of places where they can't. Now, I think part of the attraction today is that people are able to go into the Forbidden City and actually see the emperor that they've never been able to see before. So today, you can go, into someone's limo and actually go up under their skirt if you want to. But I think that we're paying a price right now, working with all these different nonprofit organizations, and this probably goes to different things that Artis said and different things Angela said there. Working with these nonprofits and different organizations throughout the city that do a lot of good and a lot of local stories and a lot of things the public should know about, they're having an increasingly difficult time to get the message out about what they're doing in the community. There are different initiatives, and part of it is that they do have to have an Angelina Jolie to get the attention to their cause or their issue, to say, hey, this is what we're doing, and I'm wondering, what do these organizations that do a tremendous amount of good have to do if they don't have a spokesperson, celebrity, who comes in sometimes for a day, who really doesn't know the organization and is looking to get press at the same time. If they don't have that, and they have a lot of loyal members and constituents and people who care about their particular cause, what exactly do they have to do at this point in time? I've seen football players or different people show up at different organizations, and I know they didn't know that much about that particular thing, but they're there just to lend some celebrity to this cause. And to me, the cause is more important than the celebrity. What do we have to do today?
Can I respond? I think that it boils down to what is your organization's narrative story? What is the soul of it? And finding a vehicle, a human being or a family, whatever, I don't know which organization you work with, that that can somehow compel a reader or a viewer to want to get into their lives and care about them. And that is, a lot of, I'm not trying to, attack PR people at all, but I think you've got to think like a writer. You've got to think like the person who is going to come to Angela and say, look, this is a great piece. And Angela says, yeah, and she is the editor. She knows what her readers are going to want to read. And to somehow, think like the editor, think like the journalist, and you've got to make it interesting. And I know somewhere in your organization there is a great, compelling human story that could have a headline.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking exactly. You've got to be able to tell the story not through the organization necessarily, but through the people that are impacted by it. And I think that our research tells us that readers crave to read about that kind of thing. Are we missing some of those stories? Absolutely. And we need the public to tell us about those stories because, every time we write a story about a student that is struggling to pay for college or a family that is struggling, we always get readers who call and say, how can I help that person? Mm-hmm. And that tells us that there is widespread interest in that, there's still a lot of wonderful people out there that really do want to help people. And when you can put a story out there like that and it can result in somebody getting the help that they need, that really makes you feel good as a news organization.
And if I may just add one thing very quickly, I think that a lot of those organizations are in a better position now than they were 10 or 20 years ago because they're not relying on the editors or the TV producers to give them the time. If you've got good stories to tell, sure, try to get them told in the AJC. Try to get them told on CNN or wherever. But set up your own website. Go out there or Creative Loafing. Go out there and tell them yourself. For a relatively modest amount of money compared to what it cost 20 years ago, you can tell that good story. And if the newspaper won't tell it for you, the TV station won't tell it for you, get on your website, tell it yourself, and use some of the tools that are out there to market your website to the people out there that want to hear that story.
And if you get the story out and there's a good person, a celebrity might want to play them in a movie, and then, it'll be aces. You had it.
Yeah, I remember when the Monica Lewinsky scandal was taking place and Rwanda was happening at the same time. And Rwanda was not played up much at all, except by the New York Times. I think sometimes it also takes a really creative journalist. Rwanda was a Holocaust. It wasn't defined as a Holocaust in headlines, but it was a Holocaust. So it was the same people died just as quickly as they died in Germany, maybe even faster for that short period of time. And now we look back at it. Right now, what we're going through in healthcare in this country, and there are incredible stories. There's a man shot, goes into an emergency room, is treated in his son, and his son has pain afterwards, and nobody will see him. Because the only thing by law you're required to treat in an emergency is an emergency where somebody's bleeding out. Otherwise, doctors don't have to see you at all. And that's disgusting in this country right now. But creatively, getting that to be a headline story, because there are tons of those people right here in Atlanta and in rural Georgia every day that are that are helpless, and they'd be much better off in any other country. You have an early sign of cancer. Tough luck. As soon as you're ready to die and you go to an emergency room at the end of your cancer, that's when they'll see you and pour a lot of money into you and you're eligible for Medicaid. But those stories are right here under our nose. And I think those stories can have a great impact on changing things. And I think you guys have more power to change that than anybody.
I agree totally. That's a good point. Thank you.
And part of it involves the people who are most affected by those stories understanding the medium that we operate in. I can think of a story that came out recently, and I don't know all the details on it because I didn't report on it. I saw it on TV, about somebody out in California, a hospital out in California that was taking people that couldn't pay and vanning them somewhere and dropping them off on the sidewalk. Why do I remember seeing that story? Because they had video from a surveillance camera on the street where this was happening of the hospital van pulling up, opening the door, and letting the people out. So there's an example of a story that has huge, huge importance and impact, particularly in that community, that was compelling. Because when you've got surveillance video, and now not to turn it back to sort of the most base reality of what we're operating in, but when you put out surveillance video or when you put out a 911 call, it attracts eyes and people click on it.
And you say creative loafing. We're looking out for those. We'd rather write about people who are doing interesting things, than the celebrity who says, I'm all for this issue, So, we talk about that all the time. So, that's definitely something that's a priority for us, So, Jake, did you have a question?
Yeah, the lead surgeon for Neil Schulman. How we got through security again, I don't know. And Art, as a serious journalist to another, is the website out for the fake Anna Nicole autopsy?
I'll show it to you. Yeah, it's a...
We seem to be treating this as a new phenomenon, what's going on. And it isn't. This goes back to when the Chinese invented the papyrus, like the 6th century BC. The dynamics have changed. And a lot of that, I think, started with Entertainment Tonight and the fact that people got news with entertainment pretty much back to back. They've never had that before. It was usually the evening news of Walter Cronkite, whomever, and then, of course, the Lassie and the mindless entertainment. That was it. That mindless entertainment has become the celebrity news, and legitimacy and success of that, as you said so eloquently, Jason, about the commercial viability of what news is and the need to survive. It's become an intentional blur and a necessary one, tragically, because of the onset of the internet, the fact that people are reading less, the literacy rates are down, and the people who used to give a damn, the advocacy people, who we saw, I think, last in full bloom in the 60s and early 70s. Some spirit, as I see with Molly, still survives here, fortunately, with a lot of us as well. But the main thing is, it's the, I mean, I just want to know your feelings. Do you feel guilty about this? Do you feel the feelings you had in journalism school when you wanted to change the world and do great things now becomes a little bit more placated by the economic viability of what journalism has become, unfortunately?
I don't know that journalism is necessarily today, if you're an 18-year-old who wants to change the world, is necessarily the field to go into, quite honestly. Because, as I mentioned earlier, what we've all learned is that journalism is not, or at least in the United States, mainstream journalism is not this great, shining knight public service. It's a business. And to the extent that that's the way these organizations operate, if you're a journalist, and I want to save the world kind of journalist, who's going to work for one of these mainstream media organizations, your days of gratification are going to be few and far between. And when I talk to college students now who say they want to be journalists, I feel like the best thing I can do as a journalist is at least be honest with them. To say, don't come into this industry with unrealistic expectations, and don't put expectations on this industry that it's not going to fulfill for you. That's unfortunate, sure. Should it change? Sure. But it's definitely the reality of what's happening right now.
Yeah, I always feel guilty. I'm Jewish. But, and I told you, I confessed, about the People magazine piece, that I felt great after that. That's a lot better than after finding Anna Nicole's prison brother. But, one paid me and the other, was... So if we can somehow work it out so as individuals, we are giving at the bank, that's great. I would love to see banks and private foundations think about funding certain websites that would be dedicated to doing the Neil Schulman stories, to going to find, that help you find that wonderful human piece to put on his website or your own, or to pitch and bring to Angela as a cut package. That is, I think that there's going to be a cottage industry of websites as a potential to do the stories that are falling through the cracks, but it's got to come from independent funding, and there's got to be a financial model that makes it work. So I can do certain things that I would prefer. I've got to go find another, train wreck.
And that, I think, is the upside in all of this, if there is one, is that while mainstream media is sort of having a degradation of values, you don't necessarily need mainstream media anymore either, because there are many, many, many different ways to get your message out there. And if it's a good story and it's compellingly told and it's marketed well, you can get an audience for it. You don't need to get it on ABC or CNN. You don't need to get it in the AJC or in Creative Loafing. There's a huge opportunity out there, to tell stories. But again, it has to make fiscal sense. No one's going to do it and lose money on it. It's got to make financial sense.
I've heard two major personalities recently state that they were not going to subscribe to chasing after the media. I think it was Anderson Cooper said he took a personal vow not to mention the name. I think it was either Britney Spears or Paris Hilton. And I think Katie Couric had also come out and said, I don't think Paris has a place in my newscast. Do you guys think that those major personalities who come out and said these things have had any success keeping some of the salacious celebrity stories out of their cast? And if they have their cast suffered at all?
Well, look what happened to Aaron Brown. at CNN. I mean, we had a serious issues-oriented newscast, and I mean, I don't know what happened here, and I think Anderson is pretty well insulated as long as he's got Angelina going to Africa. Right. I'll tell you a funny story about when I was covering the last election for ET, to get a call from my friends there who were their publicists who were asking me, Art, do you think you could interview Anderson? I mean, it shows you he's a celebrity. I mean, but at that point he wasn't as big then as he is now. But you've got gatekeepers, and once you reach a certain level, can a Katie Couric keep somebody off her air? Dan Rather did. They have a certain influence, but at some point, Paris is on ET all the time. That's part of the CBS family. So maybe, I mean, her niche is a different market, and so maybe she can say, I don't want Paris, and not suffer because people don't expect Paris on the CBS Evening News.
I'm a little bit more cynical than Art. I think it's just a backdoor way of reporting on it without saying you're reporting on it. I mean, I've heard Anderson Cooper on his show talking about that person I won't mention, and hey, if that subject matters, then filling time in his newscast. So,
sir, did you have
I'm not as negative about the effect of the media on where this country moves, what it does, what people think and feel. I go back to the days of Ralph McGill and Gene Patterson, who turned this South and certainly this city around in those days. They managed the news too, which maybe you can't do anymore, but you certainly can write columns. And the editorial writers, Friedman, people in the AJC and so on, and it may be not as blatant, but CNN and Fox News all have a very positive direction. And I think it's more of an influence than you feel. It may not be as strong as it was when the newspapers were it, but it's still there, I think. I'd like to see what you think.
And that answers, I think, to go back to, I didn't get your name, but the eloquent woman in the back who is a marketer. You're going to find the news that you want somewhere. It's just different organizations may not be willing to pay for all the news that you want in one place. So I think there's going to be more and more of a niche audience, for what you want. I mean, people at the Wall Street Journal are really afraid what's going to happen under Murdoch. So, will that be the place again? But maybe the New York Observer will, step into the fore. Or, Jason.
The Wall Street Journal, that may change too.
Yeah.
All that
Sure.
goes together. But I think the main thing is that I don't think the media, and I'm not just talking about newspapers, I'm talking about magazines, I'm talking about the giveaways were proliferating, the websites you're talking about are proliferating. There is so much out there that you're going to have to be something unique, offer somebody something, because they can get all you're talking about on any of these things. And AJC is going both splitting theirs down the middle and going to the internet and the print work tells you that. You don't know where your business is coming from. Advertisers that have a limited amount of money can't be putting ads in everything. They're going to have to, you're talking about it's a financial thing. You don't make it out of subscription. And the biggest flux in magazines right now is giveaways. The biggest growth in journalism right now is giveaways. I'm talking about here in the Atlanta market. And I don't think that the what I call the true journalists, which should be the three of you, have looked at that to see that that's where your money comes from. And what you want is a reader who's going to react to what you have to sell in your paper.
Well, to react to that.
The reader isn't going to make any difference.
Well,
and
sure.
when you do celebrity over and over and do front pages and your hard news is now blurred against your entertainment. And entertainment tonight, is a different thing too. If we're going to be entertainment tonight in our hard journalism, and I think that we've covered here tonight, we have blurred it. And we blurred it because there is so much choice out there.
Well, you're free to choose, and I'd love to show you my blog, artharris.com, because...
What was that address again?
But I'm saying we've only got 24 hours a day, and most people have a paying job, and they can't be doing this while they're doing that. They're in a car so many hours. The better comparison I see to it is taking radio. And what happened to radio when television came along? They were really hard up to say, where do we find a customer for radio? And they came in with drive time. Remember that? And they charged extra if you bought drive time because they knew people were captured in their car and they had to watch, they couldn't watch television, they couldn't read the newspaper, and they had radio. And that was where radio really made it survive after television.
Well, they've had an effect on television, too. We're seeing in the talk shows, and it's who can shout the loudest. So it's not just, it's not just entertainment shows that are guilty of this. It's all news organizations that are finding what works and who will come, And so he who shouts the loudest, or she, is getting the audience. Unfortunately, it's not news. But what do you watch at night? What shows do you watch? I'm curious. Do you ever watch?
I watch 11 o'clock news.
Okay. Do you ever watch any of the talk shows? Okay. Well, then you're probably a very discerning and unique news consumer. And what you're interested in is going to be a niche market of very educated, targeted,
I'm on
upper.
television, I'm on computer most of the daytime, but I don't go surfing the web for
Well, you're in the minority, because what I hear is that people at work surf, and that is when the most hits happen on the celebrity stories. So, as one.
As I just told you, I think
Yeah.
that's going to change.
Well.
Because I think the work market is going to say you're supposed to be working, not.
I don't think you can generalize. That's my friend at CBS who created the NFL on mobile on the mobile phone, 16 million downloads at work, and the reason was that people were sneaking away and trying to watch the basketball game, Final Four, at work, and so the phones were the answer. You could sneak off and do it, and so you're not going to change the larceny of the hearts of sports fans or entertainment junkies.
I think that working for me. One reason people like cigarette banning is they got 2 more hours a day to work out people when they can smoke their days. Emory did that survey. Do you remember that one?
I think you're going to see more and more niche stuff too, because everybody now has. There's so many different interests, and I think the mass products, 10 years from now, will be focused. The niche publications are kind of the way it seems that things are going, because there are the people that are interested in the kind of news that the Wall Street Journal gives, financial news, world news. Then there are people that are only interested in sports. But you still gotta give it to people the way they want it too, and the different delivery models, the mobile phone delivery, the internet delivery, and then the print delivery. There's still people that are, wanting the print paper. We hear from them all the time. I don't want to get my news on AJC.com. I want to get it in print. So we're trying to serve a lot of different masters and dealing with some really hard economic realities. And there's a lot of surveying and research going on about what ads work and what ads don't. And this is just a really crazy time right now for the media and all the different things that are out there and the different ways that people consume news. But I do think we need to be true to our original mission, but we still gotta be open to doing something different too.
Well, that coincides with the fact that it's 8:30. So, does anyone have Jason? Did you have anything else you wanted to add to sort of maybe wrap us up and make us feel better about everything?
If I was going to say something a little less cynical and more optimistic, I would say that, sort of like Angela just said, we're really challenged right now with sort of getting the delivery down on these things. The means of how we're getting this information to you, where you're looking for the information, what form you want it in, when you want it. And it's going to take time, but once we start to figure out some of those things, perhaps the focus will then go back a little bit more on content. But right now, my bosses, the people who decide what I do on a daily basis, are far more concerned with the how we're going to get it to you than the what we're getting to you. And once they figure out the how, perhaps they'll have some time to go back and think a little bit harder about the what.
All right. Well, I think that's good. It's 8:30, so I'll thank the panelists, Jason, Art, and Angela. So, and thank you all for coming. And good evening. Yeah, now you can show the rest of your thing if people want to see it.
So, the hard news junkies can leave now.